Anything said on Hillbilly Broadcast should be taken only as opinion. Also, the views and opinions expressed by guests of the program that we interview do not necessarily reflect the views of the hosts of Hillbilly Broadcasts or its advertisers.
Please remain calm. There is no need for alarm. This space is now being taken over by Hillbilly Broadcast.
Have you been following NASCAR any this season?
A little bit. More than several seasons.
Yeah. Did you see that finish with Kyle Larson?
Yeah.
Oh, dude. I was so freaking nervous. Number one, because with 3 laps to go on the green, white, checkered, for people that don't understand what we're talking about, that's NASCAR's version of overtime. So if you have, how does it go, Ben? Is it if you have a caution that would then extend you past the end of the race? Is that how it works?
As long as the white flag hasn't been waved. So as long as you're not on the last lap,
yeah,
you're going to get 2 laps once you go green.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's your green, and then your next round will be a white flag, and then your checkered flag. So Denny Hamlin was in the lead when they started the green, white, checkered, and I was already mad because I can't stand Denny Hamlin. And he's also won that would be the second race in a row he would have won. But then, of course, Kyle Larson comes through. And let me tell you, Kyle Larson is my guy. But let me tell you something. If I was a Chris Buescher fan, I would be a little bit upset because Kyle definitely, he definitely hit him in the door at least twice, 2 good times to slow him down. And they wound up having the closest finish in NASCAR Cup Series history. So it was pretty awesome finish.
It's nice to see some aggression in NASCAR for once, though. It's been way too sanitized and too everybody kind of just following in line and playing by the rules. It's nice to see that. That finish was at Talladega when they had McDowell was in the lead.
Yep, that was a good race. Last lap really decided that one. Atlanta was freaking fantastic at the time. That was the 3rd closest finish in NASCAR history, and that was 3 wide. They finished that one 3 wide. Now it'll be the 4th, I think, because they just had to bump it back because of this one. And actually, people it's hard to tell from the pictures because the only thing you see in all the pictures is just Kyle Larson and Chris Buescher. But Chase Elliott was only 0.007 seconds behind them. Like there was 4 of them grouped right up there together. It's been a good season so far. Been a very good season. I've enjoyed it.
I at least like to try to watch the last 10 laps.
That's where it all happens. Like the only thing you really gain by watching the entire race is knowing in real time if your driver gets wrecked out like midway. That's about the only thing. If somebody screws up, you're like, oh, okay, so he's out, and you can kind of put together some strategy. But yeah, the last 10 laps is where it all happens.
Yeah, it was nice to see that when Chase Elliott swooped in there.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. The one where Talladega, that was William Byron won that race.
Was it William? For some reason I couldn't even remember. No, that was Talladega was he hit the Michael Jordan car. Tyler Reddick. Oh Lord, I'm gonna look like a fool if I'm gonna have to pull up.
Yeah, you're gonna have to edit all this out.
I'm pretty sure it was Tyler Reddick.
No, the best thing about that race was at the end, Michael Jordan. No, that was Martinsville where that happened. Reddick won Martinsville.
All right, let me pull this up now. We got to do some fact checking here.
Yeah. I feel like we should bet a stake on him.
Talladega looks like I would win a stake, man. Tyler Reddick won Talladega.
All right. So the best part about that was there's Michael Jordan holding Reddick's little 2-year-old.
Yeah.
That kid had no idea who's holding him.
Yep, and carried him all the way to victory lane, right?
Yeah, he was down there hanging out. He's still holding the kid. And I mean, Jordan could pick up the kid and his dad. He's this mountain of a man, and the dark black man holding this little blonde-haired white kid. It was great, man. And everybody's just happy,
Yeah, absolutely.
It was awesome.
Now, who in the world would have thought that? And I understand there was a rumor back like 2000 that Michael Jordan wanted to do this. Obviously, I wasn't paying attention to Michael Jordan back then. But in my mind, who would have thought Michael Jordan would be in NASCAR? Like, that just seems like two opposite extremes. Like, it just seems strange to me. But he seems like he's enjoying it. He's in there, and seem like they're putting together a pretty good team.
Well, the West Virginia boy that I didn't realize was a West Virginia boy who I guess owned some level of NASCAR race team was Randy Moss.
Oh, yeah, Randy Moss. Yeah, he was from Huntington. I didn't know he was in NASCAR.
They were making fun of him for being too white of a black guy. He's from West Virginia. And they're racing.
Yeah, because he played for Marshall the same year that Chad Pennington played. I think Chad went to the New York Jets, and Randy Moss wound up going to New England, I think, right?
No, well, he went to Oakland for a long while.
Okay.
He went to New England for 2 or 3 years, put up a insane amount of touchdowns. Everybody thought he was washed up by the time he was done with Oakland, and they rejuvenated his career, went 16-0.
Gee whiz.
Lost to Eli Manning and the Giants.
While we're talking about NASCAR, I wanted to send a shout out over to Nick Lavender real quick, because Nick, who of course is one half of Beyond the Vow, Nick is also a NASCAR guy, and I started getting into some of these NASCAR diecasts, and apparently Nick has been in this for years. So I'm now like a 12-year-old boy that collects toy cars. But anyways, that's beside the point. And so one day Nick is like, "Hey, here's your tracking number. You got something coming." I'm like, "All right." I get home, got a box from a FedEx package outside the house. I open it up, and here Nick had sent me from his own collection one of the race win versions, and it was Kyle Larson, who's my favorite driver. Kyle Larson on his win from almost 1 year ago today. Well, almost a year ago, because he couldn't really have the race again. The All-Star race at North Wilkesboro, because Kyle won that one last year, and that was, of course, the first year that North Wilkesboro was back open, because that one was a completely abandoned track for years. Like, I'm talking, if you look up pictures of before and after North Wilkesboro, like, you would never think they would ever race there again. That place looked like it was just waiting to be demolished. Anyways, of course, I nerded out about that and bugged my wife about that car, showing her all the little details that she didn't care about.
I'm sure she found it all very highly interesting.
Oh yeah, she was very much entertained, and I say that with the highest level of sarcasm.
Very impressed.
Because then I also made her sit and watch the race highlights from that race, and show her where he got each mark, which is on the car. But anyways, I wanted to send out a shout out to Nick for that. That was very awesome, and that one's in my office at work. That one's on display there for sure. All right, there's a couple clips that I talked about that Ben, I think we ought to talk about this evening. We all know that Jim Plank was at UBC. How long ago was this, Ben? 6 months ago?
Somewhere around there in the fall.
And that's where he, very much stuck his foot in his mouth. I think Brian Holiness was the first one to break it, and there were several podcasts, I think, that wound up covering it. Remind me again, what was the gist of what he was saying? Something about that you can't, like, if you leave the Holiness movement,
if you're wearing short sleeves and you got a TV, and if you're not right with God, you've gone backwards. Even if you're behind the pulpit of another church, you're still not where you're supposed to be. And that was where he also talked about what we believe he was referring to Marvin Mosley and the molestation of the little girls, and called it a moral failure. That was all.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And I don't think he stuck his foot in his mouth. According to him, I think he spoke what he believes is the truth.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And he did put out what would you call it, a somewhat apology, which actually I think you was on the episode where we talked about that. And since then I've heard through the grapevine that some of the CHM people were not happy that he even apologized that much, and that was
of course not,
a very weak apology to say the least. So they had here past couple months, I think this happens in February or March, they have something at Calvary Wesleyan Holiness Church called Preacher Layman Convention. And let me see if I can pull these clips up here. But essentially, they have people come in, they speak on different things. I think sometimes they'll speak on outreach or whatever. I don't know. But I will find the link to this full sermon if you want to go listen to it there. There was a guy, his name is Bob Bolois, and he was pastor, if I remember correctly. I used to see him at Clinton Camp, because I think he used to pastor Crystal Park Church. I don't know. Are you familiar with that name, Ben?
Bob Bolois or Crystal Park?
Crystal Park.
I remember hearing about it. I don't remember where that church was.
So it's up, I think it's close to Canton, Ohio. And it was kind of considered like the sister church to the church that I grew up in, which is West Hill Church, because you had a bunch of the West Virginia people way back in the day got hard here. So they all migrated to Ohio or Detroit, Michigan. And then as a lot of them got older and retired, then a lot of them started coming back. So while they were up there, they were involved in Crystal Park. And then as they came back here, they were involved in West Hill. And that's to the best of my recollection. But anyways, Bob Bolois was the pastor there. I think he used to be over, it's now called New Destiny Treatment Center. It used to be called
Barberton Rescue Mission.
Yes, Barberton Rescue Mission. Yeah, I think he was over that for a while. And what's funny is listening to him now, for some reason, I don't remember exactly why, he was kind of looked at as being liberal back when I was still in it.
Yeah, I've been told by good sources that he was preaching to the crowd in this message that we're going to cover. And I would recommend people listen to the whole thing, because it's bad.
Yeah, it's loaded.
Bad from start to finish. And I'm sorry, if you think it was a good message, a good sermon, you might want to check yourself, because it's way off track. It's bad. But is this man even speaking what he believes? Does he truly believe this is the right thing, the right way, or was he just speaking to his crowd? Because some of the things he said were just flat out outrageous.
Well, that's an interesting point that you bring up about, are they just speaking to the crowd, or like what exactly is going on? Because somebody brought the point up to me the other day that, like, the stuff that Jim Plank said at UBC, I don't know if I could say a majority of, but at least a very good portion of the people that attend IHC would not necessarily be on board with that.
No.
So it's kind of hard for me to figure out, okay, what's going on? Does Jim actually believe this, or was he just playing to that specific crowd, which was UBC at the time? Or, I can't quite figure these guys out.
Well, it's kind of like politicians. To really understand them, to really figure them out, you probably got to be a little scummier than what you can even think, and where your mind can go to.
That's something I think about different times, trying to figure these guys out. And I used to really try to figure out people's motives. And Tracy Bowen actually talked to me one time about that. She's like, look, you can never know somebody's motive. Like, you can never truly know why they do what they do. But you can still see the effects of what they do. So essentially, does their motive really matter that much?
It does not.
I was like, Tracy, that's a fantastic point. And it kind of got me off of that whole thing, because I would always have this in the back of my mind, like, yeah, but what if they're trying to do good, or are they trying to be evil? And it's like, wait a minute, let's throw all that away and let's analyze what they're doing and forget why they're trying to do it.
Right, because a lot of these people are running from their damaged childhoods, and they're defending something. They think that they're going to be accepted, or they're going to be elevated if they defend the people that have done them wrong and the wrong they've seen, and they cover it up. So you'll never understand these guys' motives, but you can be a fruit inspector. People like to talk about not judging. Okay, well, we don't need to judge. We can just inspect the fruit of your life. And when it's all rotten, or mostly rotten and bad, we can tell you're doing wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, let's go ahead and jump into these here. Let me get these pulled up. Let me play the first one here. This is Bob Bolois talking about if you have a profession, a job that keeps you out of church. And I agree with Ben. Like, if you really want to get a full grip on this thing, you should listen to the whole sermon, because we're just going to cover two specific clips here. And this sermon was loaded with some stuff that will really make you scratch your head. But here's our first clip.
I made this statement some time ago and got called on the carpet for it. I don't like being called on the carpet because it's generally somebody that wants to fuss or argue, and I don't have time to fuss or argue. I walked away from too many people that wanted to argue, and I just left them standing, not to be rude, but I just didn't want involved in it.
Let me pause that right there for a minute, Ben, because that is something we heard time and time and time again. Essentially, if you disagreed with the CHM doctrine, you just wanted to fuss and you wanted to argue. And I used to kind of subscribe to that, but now I look at it, I'm like, hey, debate is like a healthy thing. But they were able to head it off by painting it in this bad light of they just want to fight.
The truth will always stand up to scrutiny. And the fact that they called us all rebellious and we were just chasing our own desires and trying to justify our sin, that was just their way of deflecting. The truth will always stand up to scrutiny. If it's the truth, it'll survive, and it will, no matter how hard you inspect it, you will not make the truth suddenly flip to a lie. And they're afraid of, and they have no leg to stand on. They cannot stand on what they preach. So how dare you question the Holy Handbook? That is the rules and laws from the old timers. You know, these guys that have passed down this wonderful heritage of holiness for, 50, 60 years. Even if you want to go back to Wesleyans, I don't even care if you want to go clear back to John Wesley. It's less than 400 years ago. It's not that long.
Yeah.
But these guys don't include it. You know, they are talking in the last 80 to 90 years, to be gracious to them. That's like 2-3 generations.
Yeah. It never was a red flag to me while I was in it. But now that I'm out, it sure enough is to where you don't ever want your doctrine to stand up to any kind of scrutiny. Like as far as scrutiny by someone that is actually there and disagrees with it. Now they will misrepresent you all day long on things that they've heard other people say, and they'll create a straw man argument, and then they'll attack that. And of course it's not. I don't think I've very rarely seen an honest representation of the other side. But that was not a red flag to me at the time. Of course, now I'm like, well, hey, what we have here, in my opinion, is a full-on definition of an echo chamber. That's what I grew up in. Was we didn't let outside scrutiny in. We didn't tolerate that at all. If you, we had like this attitude of getting all high and mighty. If how dare you? I'm not going to tolerate you talking down about this fantastic doctrine of holiness. How dare you?
Well, it also denies your humanity. It denies the fact that you have no grace for someone coming to a slightly different conclusion, and you can't get along, and they're just out. That's the reason why they have shrunk, and they whittle their groups down smaller and smaller. Because, like David Eicher said, when you're addicted to being the only right person in the room, well, that room ends up getting pretty daggone small.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just no room for someone coming to a different conclusion. And I'm sorry, but there's no way that the followers of Christ, the body of Christ, is that small. And that this one way, and this little association of churches who can't even see eye to eye when you get them around a table amongst, of them of their own, they still find ways to fight and split. And it just is a major indicator of really bad doctrine is what it comes down to.
All right, I'll back it up here a little bit and we'll keep going.
People that wanted to argue, and I just left them standing, not to be rude, but I just didn't want involved in it. But I made this statement. You can leave any other church. Now listen to me. You could leave any other church and come to a holiness church and grow in the Lord. You can never leave a holiness church and go to any other church but decline and backslide. I've had people try to make me believe. Well, we used to be part of that. We used to believe that. We used to be involved in that, but no more. We're free. Free from what? There's no such thing as growing apart from holiness. That is the eternal message, because it is a supernatural work. And that supernatural work can only be done by a supernatural God.
And obviously I had the wrong clip there. This was this is not the one about him talking about not getting to church because you work. This was him basically doubling down on what Jim Plank said. So Ben, what do you think?
Well, I can answer the what. You're free from what? Free from attempting to earn your own salvation, which is what these people do by their work, which is actually a curse, because when you try to adhere to part of the law in an effort to earn your own salvation, it's actually a curse upon yourself. So you cannot do enough. And when you abandon the believing in Jesus and that through grace by faith in Jesus and the finished work that he did, dying and rising from the dead, then you are actually attempting to earn your own salvation by all these rules they try to keep that the Jews couldn't keep. And there was always a long drawn out attempt of sacrifices, and you just keep coming back for more. And it was all for naught. But Jesus was the sacrifice at Passover, and it is the finished work. It's done. It's fulfilled. It's completed. And if you can believe in that, you can have freedom. That's why these people don't have freedom, because they never can do enough to earn their own salvation, but they're always trying to.
Yeah. Now, if I'm going to steel man that, what they would say is we don't believe that we earn our own salvation, but we believe that there are things that we have to do to stay saved. Would that be reasonable? What you would hear somebody like Joan Statler, St. Joan say?
Yes, they would say that, but the fact of the matter is, if you go, you get saved. And also, I'm going to sidetrack on the holiness church thing here, okay? Which brand of holiness? Because he says holiness, you can come to a holiness church. I guarantee you he doesn't believe Pentecostal holiness, which is actually a bigger movement than the conservative holiness movement that we call it, although Jim Plank doesn't like that. It's just old-fashioned holiness, because conservative holiness indicates that there's a liberal holiness. And bless God, we can't have that. Am I right? I'm right.
It's all about
So I just want to know which brand of holiness, I guess any holiness church you're good to. So you can go to one of these fire baptized holiness or whatever you find down in the hills and the hollers, handling snakes, that's a holiness church thing. He wasn't very specific, but I gotta assume he was talking to his crowd there. But yeah, it's just pretty egregious to try to say that my particular building, my little denomination, my little group of men is the only place you can come to and grow in the Lord. If you leave here, you're going to shrink. You're going to have a worse relationship.
What a brazen and arrogant statement to be made by a preacher, by anybody, but to say that and again, you referenced the fact that there are other church groups that are similar to the CHM and are much bigger, but for him to believe that our little group is the one that has figured it out. And if you stray away from this group, if you attend another church, so if you're Tracy Bowen, for instance, if you're Dan Downing, insert anybody here that has left and done fantastic work for God outside of the CHM. If you're in that situation, it's impossible for you to not get further away from God. And he even said backslide.
Right. Again, I'm going back to fruit inspector. Inspect the fruit of this man's life. Inspect the fruit of their life. We can litigate that court case in 3 seconds.
I've had the privilege of spending some time talking to Tracy Bowen and Dan Downing both, and I tell you what, either they're really good at fooling people, or those are some good people. And I tend to lean towards the second one. That when I talk to Dan and I see what's coming out of that church, and the same thing with Tracy, like I have no reason to not believe that they're doing anything but build the kingdom of God and bring people to Christ. And that's why statements like this is so ridiculous. This is disgusting.
Right. And there's things I've asked Dan about, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, you know some of my ideas and things I hear." But if somebody like Dan, somebody like Tracy, they have grace. They're like, well, maybe I'm right. Maybe there's, but as long as you're seeking truth and you're following Christ and you're heading, we'll use Buckler. You're heading in the right direction. Direction matters. You don't have to 100% agree with me. You don't have to 100%. You don't have to go to my particular brand of church, because that arrogance and that pride and that elitism. I will tell you, I was as bad as anybody when I was 16 years old with the elitism. I was part of the only group that had it right. I, in my little group, knew the right way.
Oh yeah.
Me too. I didn't know jack, but it made me feel so good to know that I was one of the chosen elect to get the full light and to have the full gospel, right? And now I look back and see the folly of that.
Yes.
So that's a lot of them never grow out of that. They're clinging to that elitism. My way, I've got it figured out. They're denying their own humanity. They're denying their flaws, their faults. They're claiming entire sanctification. The sin root's ripped out. They're never tempted to sin. Well, I'm sorry. If you got a pulse, you're going to be tempted to sin. You got a weakness. Whatever your particular pet sin is, like I said, we can see most of them. There's one legal sin, so they indulge in it. It's one I particularly enjoy.
Yes, the old gluttony. Yeah, I'm guilty of that one myself. Yeah.
I enjoy good food.
And some of the things he says there, a lot of this stuff comes down to definitions too, and they're completely messed up definitions of these certain things. So, like you said, they're abandoning holiness. And, so when the people in the crowd, or even maybe any normal Christian would hear like, oh man, I don't want to abandon holiness. And it's like, okay, true. But what is your definition of holiness?
Right.
And I tell you, from growing up in the CHM, my experience was that definition of holiness was we dress Amish light. We don't have TV. We don't go to amusement parks or fairs or whatever. And that was holiness. Along with this doctrine that is, if I'm being nice, I want to say very difficult to find in the Bible. And if I'm being honest, I'm going to say you're not going to find it in the Bible, of this strange second work thing, that, like you said, Ben, supposedly takes away this desire to sin, or however they want to define it. And it's like, okay, if that's your definition of holiness, then your definition's wrong. So therefore, the whole premise that you've built is now wrong.
I'm convinced I'll have a hard time ever understanding holiness and the pursuit of it in my lifetime, just from my indoctrination of the first 18 years of my life.
Oh Lord, yeah.
And I'm almost allergic to the word. When someone says holiness, I'm like, oh.
I know. It's kind of a fault of mine now.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
And it cracks me up. I've seen Pentecostals quote it probably more so. They love the verse, for without holiness, no man shall see the Lord. And okay, yeah. But that's accepting, Jesus' finished work and the Holy Ghost in you. Has nothing to do with the clothes you wear, the length of a woman's hair, the length of a man's hair, or whether a man has a beard or not, or any of the other silly little rules. And while you're talking about sports and amusement parks, my little boy is playing t-ball now, And I've stood there at those T-ball games, and I've thought, the things I knew a little bit of what I missed out on as a kid. I'm starting to realize more what I missed out on based upon my kids' experience.
I see.
And a T-ball game, there are literally no vices there. There's literally nothing that of the evilness of the world going on there.
Yep.
It is kids playing ball, and it ain't good ball. It's just getting started, hoping they run in the right direction type of thing. But there's interaction. You know, these holiness people, they are just the worst at, you know, they don't know their community. You know, that's an epidemic everywhere now, even in rural America. People don't know their neighbors.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But it's an opportunity for you to go meet other parents of kids same age. So then, you know, when you see them at the grocery store, or you see them around, or wherever you run into them, oh, hey, how you doing? You know, it's just an innocent, good way to be involved in your community. And that was, you know, that's not allowed. I mean, I know there's some brands of CHM that are relaxing some of that stuff, but just something as simple and silly as T-ball.
Yep.
Like, well, I mean, I'm sure there's a slippery slope argument. It leads to
there always is.
It leads to Little League, and it leads to skipping church on Sunday. You know, see where your kids end up. Well, look where I ended up. I was at church every Sunday. I didn't play T-ball or any other sports. So
we were allowed, and I would even say encouraged to play baseball at Clinton Camp. You know, all of us kids get together and we'd play. But essentially, what the CHM has done is, okay, so you could play there at the church camp, but if you all decide, hey, you're going to be on this team permanently, and you're going to be on that team permanently, and we're all going to dress the same way, and we're going to
the line.
Yeah, we're going to play what, 9 games? Yeah, we're going to play what, 9-10 games over the course of what, 3 months?
You're going to be gambling.
Yep. Now that's a sin. Jeez.
How dare you have fun? We have outlawed fun. That is illegal. It's a sin.
That's a sin,
fun
boys.
Is a sin. Who was that was preaching on the girl slide into second base? Was that Miller Downey from back in the day?
I'm trying to remember who that was. Somebody mentioned that to me the other day.
I don't know. It inspired whoever was talking about it to go play second base.
Made a second baseman out of that old boy.
Where you want to play second? I'm going to second. But you're 6'2". I'm playing second.
You mentioned a little bit ago about leading to skipping church. So let's play our next clip here about things like that.
But for a pastor's wife, if they're dedicated to the work of God and they're trying to show what a holiness life is, they stand behind the man of God and they're there when he's in church. They're not off working somewhere. You say, well, my wife has to work because we have to make money to live. Well, I'm not saying she doesn't have to work. All I'm saying is, you say, well, I went to school 4 years and got a degree and got a license, and I don't know what else. I'd go back to school. I'd change occupations or professions. I wouldn't miss church. Church is part of the Christian life. Why? You never know who's going to show up at prayer meeting anymore. What's happened to the drive? What's happened to the desire to get to the church?
So many things wrong with that one. Well, I guess I do got to, first off, let me give him a little bit of credit, because I did hear growing up that if your wife has to work, you're just living above your means, and she should be home essentially barefoot and pregnant and raising the kids. So I guess I do have to give him that kind of credit. But I don't know. This was probably big in your circles too, Ben. I used to hear people testify about, like, if for some reason they couldn't get to Wednesday night prayer meeting, they would say, man, it's just so hard for me to just make it from one Sunday to the next. I got to have that little extra oomph from Wednesday night. And initially I'd be like, yeah, you know, they're very dedicated. And then finally one day I was like, wait a minute, how How weak is the Christianity if we can't go? Like, if you can't make it from Sunday to Sunday without having some kind of, that's what it come across.
It goes along with their shallow doctrine. Why can't you read and study and pray for yourself and get from day to day? It's because they're going and seeking that emotional experience.
Yeah.
It's also because they probably don't have any other community or friends outside of their little CHM group. But yeah, the Wednesday night thing, that reminds me, one night I was mowing hay and I sliced my finger pretty good on the running tractor. My dad was like, "Oh, it's because we didn't shut down and go to church tonight. That's why, Come on, man. How superstitious can you be? These people hurt here believe in witchcraft, and I'm talking my own dad. I mean, it's not like if it was a Tuesday at 11 o'clock in the morning and I cut myself, well, we wouldn't have had any superstition in it. It's like I still see guys. Oh yeah, you farm on Sunday and you're going to spend all day Monday fixing stuff. You just got to shut down and go to church. Well, I'm here to tell you. Well, I'm way away from the whole Sunday thing, but Sunday is not the Sabbath. It is the first day of the week. Gathering together is great, but if you're guilting people that they're avoiding or not at every opportunity to gather together, you're doing it wrong. Your first responsibility is taking care of your family.
Yeah.
And, these people, they will get up there and say, well, you shouldn't have this job. You shouldn't have that job. I knew a guy that the place he worked at, third shift started at 11:30 on Sunday night. And so he wouldn't go to third shift. I mean, he would have probably quit his job or lost his job if he'd been forced to third shift just over those 30 minutes. Well, why don't you just pretend you're on a different time or pretend you're in a different time zone and call it 12:30.
Yeah.
Look kind of like it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Just go ahead with it. These splitting hairs things so they'll tell people that, well, you shouldn't take this job because you might have to avoid church. Now, get in your wallet, dig deep, give till it hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know what? Maybe I'd have more excess income if I could take a better job that I might have to occasionally miss a gathering in your building.
Yeah. It seemed like to me, because you started off there specifically talking about the preacher's wives and him talking about getting a degree and stuff, more than likely, if I had to guess, this guy's talking about nursing. Okay, to me, like, even if you've got an issue with working on Sunday at another job, that job right there should give you a complete pass. And also the callousness that he has when he's like, well, you should just go back to school. It's like, dude, listen, that's easy for you to say. I've sat and watched my wife struggle through this process of becoming a nurse. And that's easy for somebody that's never had to make that decision to just kind of flippantly say, well, just go back to school, just change careers. All right. Yeah.
It's real easy for a guy who's got a call, and for the listening audience, I'm putting this in quotation marks, as a call to get up in front of a crowd and deliver a message. It's real easy for that man to say it. And I'm personally very thankful that there was nurses working on a Sunday morning in January of 1986 who was able to cut my big self out of my mother because otherwise we had to wait till Monday. One or both of us probably wouldn't have survived that long.
Yes.
So there was a cesarean section performed in Mount Vernon, Ohio, and I'm very thankful that there was a staff there to make that happen.
Absolutely.
It's just ridiculous. It's another reason to condemn people. Romans 8:1 says there is now, therefore, no more condemnation in those that are in Christ Jesus. And it is just, they condemn for the stupidest thing.
Yeah.
But, we've all heard that verse, and I don't think anybody's ever understood it, sat in a CHM church. One thing that I came to realize not that long ago was that also includes self-condemnation. And I think any of us that have sat under that kind of preaching growing up, it's real hard for the self-condemnation to ever stop.
I can attest to that.
Because we can pick each other apart, or ourselves apart, I should say, and scrutinize, and even just the negative language. Oh, you dummy. Oh, you, you know, all that stuff's unhealthy. All that stuff is a story we tell ourselves.
Yes, indeed.
But, you know, I've there's very little that any other people can tell me I've pretty much given and walked away from, and not under any influence of anybody else's condemnation. But the hardest condemnation it's been for me to give up is the self-condemnation.
Absolutely. I've noticed that in myself, even as of the past few months, and finally realized how unhealthy that is.
If you tell yourself a story long enough, you'll believe it.
You'll believe it. Yeah.
And it's a problem for a whole lot of us that were raised in a high control, beat you up style preaching. You're never good enough. Well, then next thing you know, you're not good enough for yourself. And it's very detrimental to your mental health, to your peace, to your happiness.
And also, I mean, from what I gather from Scripture, we're also not good enough for God. That's why this whole thing with Jesus had to happen. Now, I do think we're supposed to try our best. I firmly believe that. I don't go down the route of this, kind of the maybe more left-leaning church of the day. You're just who you are, and just embrace it and continue on in your sin willy-nilly. I'm not here to say that. I think you're supposed to try, but you're probably going to fail.
I don't know that try is even the right word for it. I think it's letting the Holy Spirit lead you is really what it comes down to, because it's just like the fruits of the Spirit. The fruits of the Spirit are not things that we do. And there's another thing the CHM, that's a foreign language to them. No, the fruits of the Spirit are what comes out of you that is not natural to you, that is a sign that you are filled with the Holy Spirit. Peace, love, joy, happiness, for long suffering, self-control. Well, those are things that don't naturally occur in us. Laziness, greed,
mm-hmm.
and the other the flaws of human nature are natural.
Yes,
but and their fear tells a lot. And that's when I become a fruit inspector again. These people live in so much fear. Oh, I'm just hoping to make it. The devil's really fighting me. I just hope I can make it.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere, Christianity as a whole, but the CHM especially, lost sight of being a Christian's about living. And they got focused on the dying and going to heaven, and just hoping to somehow punch my ticket so I don't have to burn for eternity. Well, I'm here to tell you, being a Christian is about living. It is about this life. It is about when, Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you, plans for a hope and a future. Well, that is even when you look at the promise to Abraham and stuff, that is, a lot of that is your offspring, having kids and grandkids and being fruitful and multiplying. And that's about this life. And this has so much more importance than what they put onto it. And it has so much more importance than the threads that you put on your carcass and where you go and what you consume and what you do. It is the importance of this life and enjoying this life and leaving something after you and impacting your community and those around you. And they totally miss that. We're going to isolate. We're going to quarantine ourselves over here in a corner and wait to die and go to heaven. Wow, what a positive message. I wonder why I shouldn't say all. I wonder why such a high percent of their youth want nothing to do with it. And they do such a bad job of teaching them about Christianity that most of them want nothing to do with Christianity at all.
Yeah.
And if they come back to it, it's because God intervenes in their life and draws him to them. It is not necessarily because, and a lot of people need to be honest with themselves and just admit how bad their raising was. They need to admit that how off base and how unbiblical it was. I made the comment here to a guy recently that it honestly would have been easier to be raised in a drunkard's home than to have the mental trauma, and for a lot of people, physical trauma and a lot of other abuse that came from what was supposedly the perfect people, the frozen chosen, the elect, the only few that have it figured out. It'd be so much easier if it was because of that bottle that's where the abuse came from. And there's a lot of these first generation CHM people that came out of a lifestyle like that. And that's why they love the security of the rules and the dress standards and all. There's a certain safety in this guideline. Well, I follow this and everything's good. And I won't have to suffer like that. But then they end up perpetuating a different type of abuse on their kid. And that cycle just repeats.
I know, Ben, there's been times I've sat under a preacher and in a 45-minute to an hour sermon, he has said things that took me literally years to dig out from under, to finally get that cleared out of my mind and to get that mental wreckage that he left behind, to get that sorted out. Two reasons, I guess, why I like to play these kind of things. Number one is to show the people inside the CHM that like to say that this kind of stuff is not preached anymore. Bullcrap still is. Like I said, this was earlier this year. And second reason, I want to point out to those of you that are either out and don't know what to do, or some of you that's sitting on the fence, that this ain't true. This is flat. What you heard tonight, from what I can gather, and what I read in the Bible, what Dr. Robert Bolois said is incorrect. So don't buy.
It is a lie.
Don't buy into that stuff.
It's a lie.
Don't buy into it. That's dangerous. You can absolutely leave the CHM and get closer to God, and I feel that I have done that exact thing. Now, is it easy? Is there angels singing all the time? No, it's not. In fact, I was just sitting talking to Nick Lavender last night, and was just kind of, confided in him. Hey, man, sometimes this thing's hard trying to figure. I ain't got all the answers. I don't. And sometimes,
but you have the honesty to admit that.
Well, that's the only thing I can do.
It's a weakness to pretend that you have all the answers, because
yes,
you're lying to yourself. When you lie to yourself and everyone around you that I'm not tempted to sin, I don't sin. My flesh never sins. That is a weakness. You're being dishonest with everyone, including yourself.
Yes.
And the fact that you're honest and say, I don't have it all figured out. I mean, Ben Wyford is going to say things wrong. I'm going to have different opinions in 5 years on some things than I do now. And I'm perfectly fine with that, because I'm a human, and I'm not going to have the condemnation. And if someone says, hey, here's where you're wrong and here's why, I'm purely open to it. I'm real easy to find on social media. If you got something you want to take up with me, take it up with me. Don't take it up with Phil, because I love discussing things. And if I'm wrong and you point it out, I will be the first to admit it, and I'll be happy to get it right going forward. But it is a quality character trait to just be a truth seeker. I'm looking for the truth, not what I want to believe, not what I've been told all my life. What is the truth?
That's what it's all about. And again, about this stuff being false, about you leaving a holiness church and becoming less than when it becomes a Christian, I point you to the evidence of on Facebook. You can find Tracy Bowen. You can find Christ Church in Okeechobee. You can see what they're doing. You can find Heath Church, where Dan Downing pastors. They're on Facebook. And so is Dan. I'm sure these people talk to you. You can examine them and see, watch it for a period of time. Live stream their services. Pick it apart. And you can see by that evidence there that Dr. Bolois is wrong. And that's just two examples right there off the top of my head.
And what you're going to find in those situations is real people.
Yes.
With real problems but who can actually get some help, because you can't come into a CHM church, especially if you've been there or if you're in any position of leadership. You can't come in and be honest and say, hey, I've done this or I'm struggling with that without, oh, well, wait, I mean, unless you're one of the right last names, well, then it'll just be ignored. But it'll never be properly dealt with either way. So it's either going to be covered up or it's going to be, well, yep, you never were saved in the beginning anyway, so you got to just go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Straight to jail. You got to pray your way out, brother. You got to seek and get on your face and pray, and then come back and do it all again to try to get sanctified again, a status you're never going to achieve. But so you therefore can't be honest. You can't be real. And these people are all trained actors. And it leads to the corruption and the rot, because we can't be real about our humanity, our flaws, our warts, our imperfections. And when you look at Tracy's church or Dan's church or anywhere else around, you're going to find real people. The fact of the matter is, it ain't about finding the right church, the perfect situation. It's about finding a relationship.
Very well said. Anything else you want to add tonight, Ben?
I'm good, man.
I like it. Absolutely. There's a better way. If you ain't happy in the CHM or whatever legalistic group you're in, there's something better out there. But other than that, love y'all. Catch us at the same place next time. We'll talk to you later. Anything said on Hillbilly Broadcast should be taken only as opinion. Also, the views and opinions expressed by guests of the program that we interview do not necessarily reflect the views of the hosts of Hillbilly Broadcasts or its advertisers.